The galaxy had almost forgotten us. For 500,000 years, humanity's name was a whisper carried on fading records, a species erased from history by the Sarah Empire's iron rule. To the galaxy, Earth was nothing more than a footnote, a planet that had once tried and failed to resist the inevitable march of alien dominion. Our silence became their comfort. Our absence, their proof that resistance was meaningless. But silence is not death. Sometimes, silence is patience. When humanity finally returned to the stars, we did not come with fanfare. We did not announce ourselves with grand speeches or radiant banners of war. Instead, we returned like a shadow crossing the void, quiet, deliberate, and calculating. And the galaxy trembled, not because they saw us, but because they could no longer hear us. At the heart of this tale lies the Sarah Empire, the self-proclaimed architects of galactic order. For ages, they had ruled with unchallenged authority, their fleet stretching from one spiral arm to the next. To defy them was unthinkable. To imagine life beyond their control was heresy. But even empires grow blind in the comfort of their own power. It began with whispers. Reports of missing patrol fleets. Remote colonies falling silent. Trade routes disrupted by unknown forces. The council dismissed them as pirates, as statistical anomalies. But deep down, unease stirred. They had seen this pattern once before, in archives they dared not open. Humanity was moving. Not with the brashness of rebellion, but with the cold precision of a predator reclaiming its place in the food chain. We dismantled their communications in silence. We erased their supply lines without leaving survivors. Where their fleets once stood proud, now only debris and silence remained. To the galaxy, it was a phantom war. To us, it was justice. The Harari, a neutral race who had always walked the fine line of survival under imperial rule, were among the first to notice. Scholars and philosophers among them spoke cautiously. This silence, it is not absence. It is intent. Humanity has returned, but not as we once knew them. They saw what the others could not, that humanity's long exile had not broken us, but reforged us. We were no longer just a species. We were a force of memory, of vengeance, of endurance. The Sarah Empire, in their arrogance, sought to make an example of Earth once more. They gathered fleets to surround the cradle of mankind, demanding surrender, demanding submission. The galaxy watched eagerly, expecting history to repeat itself, expecting humanity to kneel once again. But history does not repeat when the survivors remember. When the first Imperial fleet approached, they found nothing. No transmissions. No defenses raised. Just silence. They advanced boldly, certain of victory. And then, without warning, their vessels began to vanish. One by one, systems flickered offline, engines died, and comms dissolved into static. In moments, an entire armada had been erased. Not with overwhelming firepower. Not with reckless sacrifice. But with the quiet efficiency of a species that had learned to endure, to adapt, and to strike only when certain. The galaxy called it impossible. The council called it treachery. But deep down, they knew. Humanity had returned, and we had not forgotten. This was not a war of territory. Not yet. It was a war of the mind. Psychological warfare on a scale the galaxy had never seen. Every silence we created, every fleet we erased without a trace, was a message. We are here. We are watching. And we remember. The Sarah Empire scrambled to maintain control. Their propaganda machines declared victory even as their fleets disappeared. They silenced dissent, purged officials, and demanded loyalty. But fear spreads faster than orders. In every corner of the galaxy, species that had long bowed their heads began to wonder. If humanity could rise again, what else was possible? For the first time in millennia, the galaxy began to question the permanence of the empire. And yet, there was something deeper at play. Something even the Harari whispered about only in private. For in the archives of forgotten civilizations, there were hints of another power, a shadow older than empires, more patient than humanity, and far more dangerous than even the Sera feared. They called them the architects. If humanity's silence unsettled the galaxy, the architects' silence haunted it. For no one knew if they were myth or memory. But the Harari warned. Humanity does not move without reason. If they have returned, then perhaps the architects will not remain in slumber for long. And so the stage was set. The galaxy stood on the edge of something vast and uncertain. The Sera Empire clung to power with trembling hands. The Harari watched with wary eyes. And humanity, once thought extinct, moved quietly in the dark, dismantling the foundations of oppression one strike at a time. We had been silent for 500,000 years. Now, our silence was the loudest sound in the galaxy. This is not just a story of war. It is a story of memory, of endurance, of what it means to be human in a galaxy that thought us gone. And it is only the beginning. The Sera Empire had ruled for so long that its power seemed eternal. Its fleets darkened the stars, its laws bent civilizations into silence, and its voice was the only truth allowed to echo through the void. But even eternal things can crack. And those cracks began with us, humanity, the species the galaxy had erased. We did not challenge the Empire with grand battles. We did not raise banners of war. Instead, we turned their strength against them. Their vast empire had grown too large, too bloated, too reliant on the illusion of fear. And fear, when fractured, becomes doubt. Humanity's weapon was silence, but silence carefully placed, silence sharpened like a blade. At first, the strikes seemed random. A communications relay in one sector went dark. A patrol fleet in another disappeared without a trace. A logistics convoy carrying supplies to the frontier dissolved into nothingness. But when the incidents multiplied, when the reports spread too quickly for sensors to contain, the truth became impossible to ignore. Someone was moving against the Empire. The Council called them ghosts. The military blamed rogue AI. But those who studied the old histories knew better. The patterns were familiar. The tactics precise. It was humanity. And humanity was not fighting for conquest. Not yet. We were fighting to unmake the Empire's certainty, to shatter the belief that they could not be opposed. Our strikes were psychological as much as physical. Where we could have annihilated fleets, we left a single survivor, adrift, broken, carrying tales of weapons no one had seen before. Where we might have toppled a city, we instead silenced it completely, an absence more terrifying than destruction. Where the Empire demanded order, we planted uncertainty. And uncertainty, once it takes root, spreads like wildfire. The Harari, keepers of knowledge and reluctant witnesses, spoke of it in hushed tones. The humans are not fighting battles. They are planting ideas. The Empire's fleets may remain vast, its power overwhelming, but its foundations are trembling. Fear no longer flows outward, it turns inward. The Harari had always survived by standing on the edges of history, never interfering, never choosing sides. But even they began to wonder whether neutrality would endure in this new storm. For they saw what others could not, that humanity's silence was not simply vengeance, it was strategy. Inside the Empire, doubt spread like a plague. Governors hoarded fleets to protect themselves rather than obey orders. Admirals questioned intelligence reports, afraid to lead their forces into another disappearance. Civilians whispered forbidden questions in the shadows, if the humans could rise, could others too? The Sera Empress raged against it all. Her speeches grew sharper, her decrees more violent. She promised the destruction of Earth, the final extinction of humanity. Yet with every threat, her words rang hollow, because fleets sent to carry them out never returned. For the first time in 500,000 years, the Empire looked weak. But humanity's silence hid more than strategy. It hid something the galaxy was not ready to face. Because in our long exile, in the deep dark where no empire's hand could reach, we had learned. We had watched. We had built. Our ships were not simply vessels of war, they were shadows wrapped in steel, weapons of precision that struck like thoughts rather than armies. The Titan-class warships were whispered of across the stars, though few had seen them. They moved without detection, striking with weapons that defied imperial science. Some claimed they bent space itself. Others believed they carried fragments of knowledge not of human origin. And this is where the Harari's warnings grew darker. For in their archives, in texts preserved from civilizations long vanished, there was mention of an ancient force, the architects. Beings older than empires. Builders of structures across galaxies. Shapers of civilizations, and destroyers of them. The Harari asked a question the galaxy dared not echo: had humanity found the architects in its silence? Or had the architects found humanity? The Empire dismissed such speculation. To them, the war was simple. Crush Earth, silence humanity, erase the whispers. But the harder they pressed, the deeper the fear spread. Every failed campaign became a symbol. Every silence became a roar. The galaxy watched carefully now. Races long broken by the Empire's rule began to test the edges of defiance. Protests sparked in distant colonies. Trade guilds ignored imperial taxes. Soldiers deserted, vanishing into the shadows with rumors that humanity welcomed them. And so the Empire found itself fighting not just an enemy, but an idea. The idea that the galaxy could change. Yet humanity was not reckless. We knew the danger of being too visible, too soon. For every strike we launched, we pulled back twice as quickly, vanishing into the void before the Empire could rally. We fought not to win battles, but to shape the war. Each silence was a seed. Each strike, a reminder. And each survivor carried our message into the galaxy. Humanity has returned. Humanity remembers. Humanity waits. But behind this war of shadows, another truth loomed. The Harari spoke of it with unease. The architects will not remain hidden forever. If humanity has touched their legacy, then this silence is not only a war against the Empire. It is a prelude to something greater. The galaxy, blinded by fear of the Sarah, had not yet understood. Humanity was not their greatest threat. We were only the signal, the first movement in a song the galaxy had forgotten how to hear. And as the Empire fractured, as whispers of rebellion spread, as humanity's silence grew louder, something older stirred in the dark between the stars. This was not the end. This was not even the war itself. This was only the silence before something far greater awoke. Silence had been our weapon. For years, it was enough. The Sarah Empire fractured under the weight of its own fear. Fleets vanished into the void. Colonies rebelled. Doubt spread faster than their decrees. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy whispered our name with awe and terror. But silence cannot last forever. And when it broke, something older answered. The first signs came as distortions at the edge of known space. Sensors reported structures where none had existed before, vast, geometric constructs suspended in the void, as if the stars themselves had been rearranged. Fleets sent to investigate never returned. At first, the Empire blamed humanity. We were the convenient enemy, the phantom they already feared. But even we did not understand what was stirring. These were not our weapons. These were not our designs. The Harari recognized them. In their archives lay fragments of memory, warnings written in the ruins of extinct civilizations. They called them the architects. Not conquerors. Not rulers. Builders. Shapers. Engineers of galaxies. And when civilizations no longer served their design, erasers. The galaxy had always dismissed the architects as myth. Stories told to frighten children or to explain ruins too old for records. But now, their works were awakening. Entire star systems fell silent overnight. Not destroyed, silenced. As if life itself had been erased from existence. No debris. No survivors. Just absence. And for the first time, humanity's silence seemed small compared to theirs. When the first architect construct appeared near Imperial territory, the Sarah Empress ordered an assault. Hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers, the might of an empire unleashed against a single structure. It did not fight back. It did not need to. Weapons dissolved before touching its surface. Engines failed as though space itself refused to carry them. The fleet disintegrated, not in fire, but in silence, absorbed into the architect's design, repurposed for a purpose no one could comprehend. The Empire's arrogance shattered in that moment. Their fleets, their laws, their threats, meaningless before something so far beyond their scale. And the galaxy turned its eyes to humanity. For we were the only ones who had returned from silence. The Harari whispered. Perhaps this was always the purpose. Humanity endured exile not to fight the Empire, but to prepare for the architects. The galaxy mistook vengeance for destiny. But humanity's true war has not yet begun. It was not a comforting thought. Because even we did not know if it was true. Humanity's fleets, the Titan-class warships once whispered of as legends, now stood not as predators, but as guardians. For the first time, we fought not from the shadows, but in the open. We engaged the architects where the Empire could not. And yet, our weapons barely scratched them. The architects were not enemies in the way the Empire had been. They did not rage. They did not command. They simply acted, cold and unyielding, according to patterns no one understood. To them, we were not rivals. We were variables. The galaxy trembled. Civilizations that had once bowed to the Sarah now looked to humanity not out of loyalty, but out of desperation. If the humans can fight them, they whispered, then perhaps there is hope. But hope was fragile. Battles against the architects were not victories, they were delays. For every construct we dismantled, another appeared. For every silence we broke, the architects created a deeper one. And in the heart of the Harari's records, a darker truth emerged: civilizations had risen before. They had defied the architects before. And all had fallen. Except us. Why had humanity survived? Why had we been allowed to endure 500,000 years of exile? Was it chance, or design? Some among us feared the answer. That we were not resisting the architects at all, that we were fulfilling their plan. Perhaps humanity had not returned to defy them. Perhaps humanity had returned because they needed us to. The war changed everything. The Empire, once supreme, now stood broken. Their fleets scattered, their colonies abandoned. The Empress herself vanished into the silence, her voice no longer the law of the galaxy. The galaxy itself was in flux. Civilizations rose in rebellion. Old powers stirred. Alliances formed and broke in days, desperate to survive. And at the center of it all, humanity carried the impossible burden, to stand between the architects and the void. But what does it mean to fight something beyond comprehension? To resist beings who do not think of war, or peace, or conquest, but only of design. It means redefining what it is to be human. We are not the strongest. We are not the oldest. But we are the species that remembers. The species that adapts. The species that endures silence, exile, and oppression, and still chooses to rise again. And that is why, even in the face of the architects, the galaxy watches us. Because we are proof that survival is possible. Proof that defiance matters. Proof that silence can be broken. This is not the end of the story. The silent war with the Empire was only the beginning. The awakening of the architects is the true test, the question of whether humanity and the galaxy will remain free, or whether we will become nothing more than another erased civilization in their endless design. And so we fight. Not because we believe we will win, but because silence, for us, is no longer an option.